we go. Good evening, everyone. This is Cheryl Leong, and welcome to another series of The Business of Property. I'm just waiting for Zoom to put me on live. And we have a very exciting guest here today, Mish Daniels. And Mish is focuses on commercial property and commercial development, which is not something that we have gone through very much in property development in Australia. We tend to have a lot of residential developers, which was the reason I really want to have Mish come and share her experience and her expertise with us, because I'll have to be honest, I don't know a lot about commercial property. I've heard a lot, but obviously that's just sort of the tip of the iceberg. So I'd like to welcome Mish to the business of property and to property development in Australia. Mish, I'm going to read a little bit of a bio so people can sort of get an idea, have a little bit of a glimpse of who you are. In the meantime, I'd like to say, give me a moment while I find where the Facebook page is, because if anyone has any comments, and I will just see if anyone's in the waiting room as well. We have the Zoom link attached. Oh, there we are. We do have people. Bing, bing. If you have any comments, feel free to pop it in the chat. If you have any comments on the Facebook Live itself, feel free to pop it in the comment section, and I will attempt to multitask and check both avenues. Like I said, this is going to be very conversational, and Mish will give you an opportunity, obviously, to share with us your knowledge and also be able to answer some questions as well. So let's hop into a little bit of, I guess, who is Mish Daniels? And Mish, you started your passive portfolio investing from the age of 22. And you've accumulated 28 properties in 29 years. That's fantastic. I know when we talked first, you said you loved renovation. What is the term that you like? You like ugly, or you love ugly?
Yes, my payoff line is I love ugly. Give me ugly because I love making ugly beautiful.
Excellent. And not only have you been in real estate, you're obviously an avid sort of entrepreneur and a businesswoman as well, being sort of
Yes.
from a manufacturing background, which is what sort of exposed you a lot to the commercial and industrial space.
Correct, yeah.
But you've really spent the last sort of 30 odd years teaching and coaching and mentoring students, from sort of entry level positions to senior management, and I've applied it to now what you do in terms of your coaching for commercial development and investment.
Yeah, so it's kind of been a bit of an organic beginnings where through the manufacturing, I used to run manufacturing plants, and at the same time I used to run development projects, and I would send the same drivers and the same staff to be doing the same jobs. And the difference was clothing versus building materials. So exactly the same process, just slightly
different product.
Yeah, different product. And I would teach and coach people along the way. And I say it's organic because it's kind of organically just given me the foundations for where I've taken the business to now. So obviously no more manufacturing, it's all real estate now.
So tell me, I mean, commercial property, I know there's been, as you would know, coronavirus has hit, lots of news about job losses, the impacts on retail and commercial and all of that. How has that meant, what's really happened in this space in the last 3 to 4 months?
Okay, very interesting question there, Cheryl. And what's basically happened is exactly what's happening in the residential sector is happening in the commercial sector. Commercial obviously is a little bit slower, and being that commercial is our bread and butter, a lot of those businesses obviously have been hard hit. Now, what we're seeing is that the businesses that were on very, very shaky legs are buckling right now and probably won't be able to sustain themselves. However, the businesses that were pretty firm and doing pretty well have managed to carry themselves through these last 2 or 3 months. And what we're anticipating is that those businesses, and we've actually started seeing it coming through, that those businesses are strengthening, and we guessing that they're actually going to strengthen and grow exponentially. So the ones that are surviving are actually doing very, very well for a number of reasons. A, that they could sustain themselves, and B, that a lot of their competition have probably fallen off and they're picking up a lot of that business.
Okay. So in terms of, I guess, percentage wise, if you look overall with the commercial space, what sort of percent out of 100 have been adversely affected by coronavirus?
Look, I couldn't give you a figure off the top of my head. I mean, that's something more for the statisticians to have a look at. But I can tell you just from the small retail space that we've been working in, I would say at this stage we're only seeing probably about 5 or 10%, but it's still very early days, considering that a lot of those businesses are only really starting to open up again. You know, if you
Yeah.
think about it, the gym's only open today. So we haven't really seen the full effect of it, but where we're really going to feel it and where we're going to see it is when the government assistance stops, which is in September. So in other words, when the employee payment stops, I think that's where we're really going to start seeing, you know, who's going to survive this and who's not.
Yeah, yeah. And so, okay, let's step back a little bit and go back to sort of commercial development and commercial property 101.
Right.
What's considered commercial? And maybe I know we put together a little slide here, so it'll be a bit of an educational session. So let's
Okay.
share your screen. I'm going to say hello to everyone that's joining in. Nang, how are you doing? Kieran, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, please feel free to pop it in the chat, and the same to you as well, Michael.
Right, yeah. Okay, so can you see my screen there, Cheryl?
Absolutely.
Okay. Um, So just to answer your question, what is commercial? Commercial is basically anything where you're running business out of. So we'd start off with a very basic of commercial, which would be a resi-mercial, where you've got traditionally in the old-fashioned days, you had commercial at bottom, mom's fish and chip shop, and they would live upstairs. So we would call that resi-mercial. So you still get quite a lot of that, especially in regional areas. However, it's sort of fading away. And in fact, it's kind of starting to do full circle where those resi-mercials have faded away and turned into full commercials. And now what's happened is with the gentrification of areas, they've realized that especially in smaller precincts, that resi-mercial is still very valuable. So they're bringing back in development, you'll see quite a lot of we call them shoebox manufacturing, where you've got your little residential downstairs and your apartment upstairs, which is a hell of a lot smaller. So it's smarter spaces than what it was traditionally.
Okay, so and I've seen actually interesting. You mentioned that there's I was watching a video today on some shop top housing. So is what you're saying is that mixed use spaces are becoming less mixed use and just more commercially focused?
Yeah, so things kind of went from that mixed use resi-mercial into full commercial,
Yeah.
and then and now in new precincts they kind of bringing it back. So I've just popped a screen up there just to explain to people the difference between commercial. So essentially, we say in commercial that there are 3 different types of commercial. And yes, they do dovetail each other, but your essential 3 commercials are commercial office, which would be high-rise office or street-level strip shops. Then you've got your industrial, which would be warehouse, which could be massive industrial. and what we call light industrial or tilt slab. So it would be your smaller units of industrial. And there's so many variations around that as well. So I'm just making it very simple by, identifying three. And then you've got your retail, which would be large retail complexes like your Westfields. And then you've got your smaller mom and pop retail, which would be strip shops or little family retail shopping centers and the likes there.
And do you personally invest in all three segments?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the things that we do and that I very much advise my clients to do is to spread your risk. So, this time around, we've been hit by COVID-19, which has affected retail in a very big way. However, there's certain pockets in retail, certain sectors in retails that have actually strengthened as a result of it. And in previous years with the GFC, industrial was hit pretty hard. And retail kind of survived. So it's a very good idea to have that lovely spread across your portfolio of a little bit of everything. It's a bit of mitigation of risk, basically.
Yeah, and
That's what
that's
we
a
look
really
at.
interesting point because when you look at the residential space, um, there's not a lot of different asset types that I mean, there are, but not a lot as in the differences you have in the commercial space there. You could be renting townhouses or units or, houses, but
Yeah.
effectively you've got the same sort of tenant.
Yeah, well, in terms of types of tenants, and that's a very interesting thing because whenever I speak to people about the differences of residential versus commercial, in terms of the people that you're renting to, your tenants. In commercial, you find that your tenants understand business. They are business people.
Mm.
Okay, they've got a business mindset. So the lovely thing about it is their business is basically their shop front of how they want the world to see them. So it's very unlikely that they're going to wreck the place because that's their source of income,
Mm.
you know. Um, which is that's one of the nice things about commercial is the tenants generally tend to be a little bit more responsible as opposed to residential. And please don't think that I'm undermining residential here. I've had residential for many years. um, and I can tell you stories about moving from residential and why I've moved more towards the commercial. Lovely stories, in fact. But we won't get into that when we
No.
have time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's just that massive difference of mindset. It really is what we're talking about over here is mindset,
Mm.
and the importance of that's bread and butter. That is the dollars coming through their doors. So there's a fundamental need to maintain those properties from the business perspective,
Mm.
which is quite a different mindset from when you're renting residential. And not to say that everybody's like that, um, but I found having a portfolio of both residential as well as commercial, that my commercial tenants, if they had a broken valve or a toilet or something like that, they tend to just go and fix it themselves.
Mm.
Whereas in residential, it's kind of expected that we would send somebody out to go and change the light bulbs and, do those sort of things.
Sure.
So, so
That's a
that's,
really interesting because I've never really thought of it that way. But it's, now that you've highlighted it, it is because, obviously that's their business. They're more, the term house proud.
yes.
Um, whereas, you drive past a property that's been tenanted and that, the grass hasn't been, the lawn hasn't been mowed, and certain things that you sort of can spot, which is the residential house. Not saying that all, tenants are like that, but I
Mm,
get what you're saying there. And, but industrial in saying, is it the same thing with industrial where, in my mind that's you've got some, light machinery or even heavy machinery there. What's the wear and tear and all, and how does that impact your investment risk?
Great question. Great question. Now, often what happens is in commercial, the leases are all legal binding documents, okay? And what we do with commercial leases is we have a make good clause, which could mean that when the tenants move in, they might need to drill into the floor, they might need to bolt machinery into the walls, wherever. The make good clause basically confirms, it agrees that when they move out, that they restore the building to the way that they found it. So what we would traditionally do is take photographs of that naked building. They do all their fitments in it, and every single fitment basically has to be agreed to and signed off by the vendor, by the owner of the building. And in some cases, they want to do major renovations. I've just had a building in particular, it was an industrial building where they wanted to remove some walls, and they actually removed an entire mezzanine. That is expenses. That's a massive cost. And from my perspective, it's basically, I've just paid $50,000 to put that mezzanine in. And that was 3 years ago, and now they're wanting to remove it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, but it's the difference between, if you don't agree to it, then you lose the tenant. So I'm saying, okay, happy days, remove it, but at least I've got 5 years worth of rental, and I don't have to worry about chasing up on it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
5 years worth of continued rental. That's on autopilot, really.
And do they have to make good the mezzanine that they've removed?
In this case, no, they don't have to replace the mezzanine, and that's in the negotiation.
Yeah. Damn it.
However, being commercial, there were a couple of other things that we needed to negotiate around, which were pretty high dollar numbers, but in agreement, and you do that into the lease, and one would do it over a length of the term of the lease, or maybe a shorter term. So in our case, we negotiated it over 12 months, which works in favor of both of us.
Okay, excellent. Excellent.
So that's another advantage in commercial.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's talk about retail. And there's been a lot of news around retail space, obviously, and the effect coronavirus has had on that. What are you finding personally, and how has that probably impacted your personal portfolio of that, or that of your clients?
So again, very interesting space, and very dependent on what you have as tenants in retail. And we've had some tenants that are in personal services, so like skincare, beauty, healthcare, massage, those sort of businesses. Obviously, they've been shut down, so they've been pretty hard hit. And it's been financially quite straining on them as well as us, because we've given them free rentals and rental deferments as well. And it's been a very interesting relationship, because one of the key things about how I like to do my business with my tenants is, I believe that my tenants are my business partners, and I take them on as business partners. So whatever's working for them works for me, and whatever changes that they need to make to the building that's going to add to their business, I'm very open to it. So when something like this happens, it was a matter of having a conversation with each and every single one of them, so that they know that I care about them. I care about their businesses. I want them to survive. I want them to thrive. So all of the businesses basically, fortunately, that we've had have been fairly stable businesses. Some of them are only opening up, have only opened up last week, and they've pretty hurt through it. There's a little list that we'll go through in one of the other slides. I'll get to it, where we'll talk about the type of tenancies as well. And then on the other side, we've had some other retail businesses, Domino's Pizza, for instance. These guys have just taken off. It's been their best months that they've
Yeah,
ever had
they
in the
haven't been
last.
this busy for years. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. So and then again, there've been some smaller restaurant type takeaway foods that haven't really been set up as fast food takeaways. So they've been a little bit slow on the uptake of that. They've suffered a little bit. Coffee shops, they've also suffered a little bit. So their turnover has gone down by about 80%. And working around how they could make changes to their business to support their clients and just keep the revenue going has been quite an interesting process as well.
And just yeah, just on that, like, have you seen, are there any stories that you've heard where there are businesses that have been hit hard but have been able to pivot quickly and taken advantage of the changes?
Not yet,
Mm.
not yet. And in fact, the only business that I can think of is a little postal business that was on. It was on its knees. It was about to collapse in November and December of last year, and COVID-19 hit, and this business has just taken off like it's shot through the roof. It's
Mm.
just gone ballistic. Yep. Um, and that's purely because of deliveries, because
Mm.
it was a distribution center, so a postal distribution center. And I really hope that those kind of businesses continue. So um, I really hope that COVID-19 has had its advantages in saving those little businesses and giving them a new, as you say, a new pivot in the right direction.
Yeah, yeah, and that's really, really interesting. Kieran has said here, so tenants' business performance is the key driver for return on commercial property. So he's asking.
100%. Well, in fact, I can't say it's 100%, but it's largely a key driver in commercial property, because bearing in mind that the strength of your lease is where your cash flow is coming from. So the stronger that the tenancy is, the stronger your lease is. The longer your tenant wants to stay there, the stronger your lease, the stronger your deal.
Does it make you want to spend on all your tenants just to support them?
Depends what they're wanting.
Yeah, but
I do. I do. I'm one of those landlords that do believe in spending on the buildings. So my philosophy is I would rather invest in my own building instead of paying taxes for it. I'd rather take that money and chuck it back into the building. So we constantly doing uplifts in the building, and what happens as a result of that? The tenancies, generally, if they're good tenants, they strengthen from that. The building looks better. You raise your income.
mm,
You can raise your leases, your rentals. You're adding value, um, and it's a win-win situation all the way down.
excellent. All righty. Well, let's move on to the next slide, which we talk about exactly what is the difference and the advantages between residential and commercial. Talk us through this, please.
Okay, so this is probably one of the biggest advantages in commercial, which is, and I just want to move my mouse over here. I don't know if you can see that. Right here.
Oh,
Have I
Foong
moved the
says
screen?
hello as well, Mish, by the way. Foong
Hello,
from Adelaide.
Foong. Lovely to have her on the call, on the chat. Foong's got a lovely story about her property as well. We worked pretty hard, and so she's got a great property, medical property. That was a really good deal for her.
I'm going to say, sorry, if you don't mind, I might invite Foong. Foong, if you can see the Zoom invite on the event page, it would be great if you want to join the Zoom chat, and then maybe we can have you share your story, maybe a bit later on in the piece. So Foong, if you're willing and able, hop on the Zoom call.
Thanks for that, Cheryl. That's nice of you to invite her.
Gate crashing.
Yeah, it's great. Good. That's what Zoom's all about, eh?
Exactly. Exactly.
So the screenshot that we've got up there is it's very, very basic. And what we did is we had a look at all the expenses that would cross-pollinate between residential as well as commercial. And we're looking at rates and special services, management, maintenance, aircon, servicing, structural building repairs, fit outs, renovations, that sort of thing. So, and if you just think about in residential, and this is the thing that really got me, is I would have tenants that would come in for a year and there was wear and tear, and every time they moved out, I'd have to go in and do cupboard fix-ups and painting fix-ups and maybe a little bit of toilet repair and all that. But I always found that it would take about a week or so, could be quicker. But just to get the place into a re-rentable place for new tenants to come in, and it was a little bit of an expense for me. Whereas in commercial, because of that do good clause, you go in, they clean it up, they do all the fix ups and all of that, and in their tenure, they're responsible for all of those sort of repairs and maintenance. So 90% of commercial leases are net leases. So in other words, the tenant pays for all the outgoings. And that is a massive, massive, massive bonus where your tenant's paying for your rates, your services, your management fees, your maintenance, aircon servicing. If there are any structural defects, so everything that has got to do with the actual building itself is for the landlord's account, but everything over and above that can be, and I don't say it is, it can be for tenants' account. Okay, so that we all chuck into the outgoings, which means that in residential, if you've got a lease or a tenancy that is maybe a 6 or a 7% yield, if it's not a net yield, you're going backwards. Because if that's a gross yield, all your expenses over and above that is maybe take you to a 3 or a 4%. Whereas in commercial, we look at net yield only. So everything is based on net yield. When I'm quoting prices and yields, I only talk about net yield. So it's the cash that's going into your pocket. When I'm talking about 7, 8, 9%,
Mm.
that is the cash that's going into your pocket.
So, is there much for the property manager to do?
Aha, very good question, and I'm so pleased you've asked that.
I'm listening, so at least you know I'm listening.
Depending on the type of business and depending on the type of person that you are. So let's take, for instance, a strata, an office in a strata building. What do you need what do you need a manager for? All they're doing is they're putting an invoice in, realistically.
Mm.
Okay. If it's a retail complex where you've got maybe 10 tenants and they tend to be different or difficult tenants, then yes, maybe you need a manager for that, because then you're looking at the building, you're looking at each individual tenant, you're looking at the general maintenance of the building, the upkeep, the gardening, maybe all that sort of stuff that your tenants might be paying for. However, somebody needs to run that.
Mm.
That's where you might want to have a manager. If it's just one industrial business, or if it's just one industrial warehouse, sometimes you don't need a manager. So
Yeah.
I'd always say, depending on the type of person who you are, if you want to get your hands dirty, if you want to do that yourself, and or the type of commercial building that we're talking about.
Okay. And so one of the things and people often say is, commercial's got great returns, but there's higher risk as well, because what if you lose the tenant?
Everybody's biggest fear. So what we do in commercial is mitigation of risk. And I do that through a series of strategies. And I'm not going to go through all the strategies here. However, when we start a journey in commercial. And when clients speak to me about their fears of vacancy, we have to look at the probabilities of everything. So we have to look at why, number one, why do those properties become vacant? And what we find is 90% of the properties that we see are vacant are largely because of a fallout between landlord and tenant. That's probably one of the biggest, where landlord gets greedy, tenant can't afford to pay rentals anymore, there's lack of communication, and tenant says, well, I can't afford it, I need to go. Now, one of the big things, and what I said earlier, is work with your tenants, because your tenants are as important as your building.
Mm.
You know, they're on par, 50-50. So I really believe in, I have personal relationships with every single one of my tenants. They can pick up the phone and speak to me at any given time. I pick up the phone and speak to them if there's something that's troubling me. And the better that relationship is, the better your business is going to thrive and survive. That also allows me to know how their businesses are doing, and I have open conversations with them. If their leases are coming up for renewal, I like to find out how their businesses are doing. Do they want to carry on in the business? Do they want to move on? Are they expanding? Do they need more space? Do they want to shrink down? You know, these are very, very important conversations that you got to be having. So with regards the fear of vacancy, unless the business seriously goes out of business, I always say that the number one reason is communication. So there are many other reasons around that. However, in my opinion, I would say the biggest cause of vacancies is communication, and it's that lack of management, of managing the relationship and the communication with your tenants.
Yeah. So how much do you understand their business, and what do you look at when you're assessing a tenant, a suitable tenant for your properties?
Everything. We look at everything. We
Yeah.
try and look at as much as possible. So the biggest thing about commercial, when you're buying a commercial property, your biggest thing is that obviously you want to know that your net yields are strong. You want to know now. In fact, I'm just going to stop you, and I'm going to change topics slightly.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a little piece of gold.
Excellent. We like gold.
Okay. I always say in residential, you've got basically two areas of due diligence. Okay, you've got your building and you've got your area, and there are a couple of other little bits and pieces around there. Okay, in commercial, you've got 5 areas of due diligence. So commercial is a lot more difficult because you're having to do due diligence against around 5 areas. You've got your building, you've got your area, you've got your tenants, you've got the strength of their business, you've got the surroundings. Okay. Um, we also have a look at those businesses, and we look at the moving parts in the businesses. So are they working in that area? So there's so much more when buying a commercial property
Mm.
that you need to know. And I'm very fortunate, Cheryl, because I've spent 30 years building businesses and running businesses. So I understand the business aspect of commercial. And I think it's fundamental that you have some sort of understanding, you know, of cash flow statements and that, so that you can look at your tenants and say, yes, they're a strong tenant, or
Mm.
no, they you know, they're suffering, they're weak. So we need to know how the tenants are doing when we're buying those commercial properties.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so one of the biggest things is knowing the strength of the tenant, and of course the length of the lease.
Excelente. Alrighty. Let's move on and have maybe have a look at the difference between what you might invest in. Oh, apples with pears. I don't know. The
Right.
same
Okay.
amount with the same amount.
Okay, so this is just a quick little snapshot of some numbers that I did a little time ago, and I've just used the 590 in residential versus exactly the
Mm.
same. So what can you buy for 590 in residential versus what can you buy for 590 in commercial? And I've looked at the rentals in residential, and all the fees involved. So the agent's fees, council, water, rentals, mortgage repayments, and what your cash flow is at the end of the day. Now, of course, this excludes HMOs or multi-level living, those sort of things, because obviously your expense is a little bit higher and your income's quite a lot higher as well. So this is just your ordinary
Standard.
rental, okay,
Mm.
versus commercial. Now, generally, if it's a good commercial, you're going to be getting a far better lease. So let's say, for argument's sake, this is a Domino's Pizza. You'd be getting a far better lease because you're actually paying a premium for that business as well as for the building. Okay. So just to explain that, the building has a certain value. The lease adds to the value. So a Domino's Pizza shop, for argument's sake, if it's vacant, it's going to be worth, let's say, 200,000. The minute a Domino's Pizza, so a brand name, comes into it, it's going to almost double in value. Okay, if that explains it. So here, for instance, you've got rental per week of 1230. You've got exactly the same. You've got the agent's fees, the insurance, the rates, the maintenance, your mortgage per week, and your repayments. However, your cash flow at the end of the day is a hell of a lot higher for two reasons: because your rental per week's higher, and also your tenants are paying those outgoings.
And what is the LVR that you can get on a commercial?
Changing at the moment in a big way. Lenders are pulling back majorly.
Yeah.
But your LVR, we work on a standard of about between 60 and 70%, which means that you need about 30 to 40% to get into a good commercial, unless you're buying in a group scheme. That's something slightly different. Your lending rate, depending on the type of property that you're buying and the strength of the lease, you could be purchasing those properties for as little as 2.85% at the moment. So let's call it, let's say 3%, which means if you've got a positive yielding property of 8%, that means that you are pocketing 5%. That is cash, pure, absolute cash in your pocket. So what I always do is I run some numbers, and if anybody's out there and they want to write this down, get pen and paper, because this is a little bit of a benchmark to help you understand how you can get into commercial property and what you need for commercial property. So I'm going to start with the higher number first. Let's say you've got $400,000. Okay, $400,000 is going to give you a property of $1 million. And that is a 60% LVR. So I'm being very, very conservative in my numbers here. At $1 million, if you're earning a 7% yield, and again, very, very conservative, because we've just done some properties at $1 million that are giving us 10% yields, and these are good properties in Brisbane Centrals. Okay, so conservatively 7% is your rental, which is $70,000. Okay, if you are getting that property and your lending rate is 2.85%, again, I'm rounding it off to 3%. That means that you're putting 40% of that into your pocket. You're going to be earning a rental of about 70 to 75,000, and you're going to be pocketing about 30 to 35,000. And again, I'm throwing rough numbers out here. Don't quote me on these. These are depending on every single person's individual profile. Okay, depending on your financial strength, basically, and the strength of the lease. Depends on which type of dock that you're buying it, whether it's a low dock or a no dock deal. Okay, that's all going to make a difference. But that's kind of the benchmark. So at 500,000, you need 200,000 deposit to buy a $500,000 property. At 500,000, you're going to be getting $35,000 rental. At 35,000, you're going to be pocketing between 22 to 28%. Sorry, 28,000.
And so when you're talking on return on equity, So
$28,000.
out of 500,000.
No.
No.
You put
200,000.
you're putting
200,000.
200,000
Oh, sorry,
in.
200,000. Yes.
You're putting 200,000
Your
in, and you're
voice.
gonna
God has spoken. Thank you,
Okay.
Kieran.
And again, if you've got 100,000, you're buying a property of roughly 250,000. Your rental is going to be around about 17,000, so you're going to be pocketing around about 12,000. So if you want $1,000 a month, there's your benchmark.
Yeah, fantastic. Kieran / God, he's asked, is it okay to ask clients about their financials to access them before
Before, like, before accepting him as a tenant, like,
Oh, you mean
you look at their
you mean
financials?
tenants or clients?
sorry, clients. Like,
Tenants.
say if it's an existing business and you're buying it, is it
Mhm.
okay to ask the client's financial, his business financial, the tenant's business financials to assess him and, like,
Yes.
for
Say that's
even
the
for
first thing
rental
you'd ask for.
appraisals down the line?
Look, it's one of the things that I have always asked for traditionally. I don't always get the answers. Okay, they're not always forthcoming. However, because of COVID-19,
Yeah,
it's
that's
now
yeah.
become the sixth point of due diligence. So it's become the
Okay.
norm now that we want to really look at it. And again, another little piece of gold, if you are doing that, then what you want to do is you want to have a look at how strong the business was 12 months ago and go 12 months back from that, because that history should effectively tell you how they're going to perform and what type of business they are. So I'm actually going to snap into the next slide, which a lot of people always ask me at the moment, what are the types of businesses that are thriving and surviving at this point? And I've got them up on the screen there. So a lot of takeaway and food services, medical, surgical supply and distribution. In fact, I just put one property out yesterday, which was a medical supply and distribution. Unbelievable yields, the most beautiful property. I've called it a hot property deal. Cheryl, if there's anybody out there that is looking for a hot property right now, this is it. Because if I had the finance, I would buy it myself.
and says for something like that, like, how much do you need to start off with?
Look, that one you would need 600,000 because it's a very, very good yielding property. It's snap on 7%. It's a brand new development. So it's a brand new building. So you're getting really great depreciation on that.
Yep.
However, 1.66 million is gonna get you that property. And you do have effectively 10 years of certainty out of it because the tenant has signed a 5 + 5 year lease. And they're a good, very good, strong tenant, medical distribution, supply and distribution.
Sorry to interrupt. Who claims the depreciation? Is it the tenant or the owner for the commercial?
The owner. The owner.
Okay.
So the depreciation forms part of the building. And anything that has got to do with the building is the owner, it's the vendor.
Okay. So the only operating costs are the ones that was listed before in the previous slide, isn't it?
Yes. So anything that is wear and tear, that is outgoing,
structural
basically.
And stuff.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love how you've put bottle shops there, because I'm sure I think bottle shops just went. Anyone that was homeschooling, I added to that. I think my husband gave me 2 bottles of gin for Mother's Day. I like gin. I didn't think I really needed 2 bottles, but that's who has contributed to the increase in revenue in bottle shops.
Was that one for each kid?
Yeah, exactly. And his his Mother's Day note for the rough times ahead.
I can totally relate. Good on him. Very wise partner there you have, Cheryl.
Yeah. I was like, wouldn't there be like, many wishes? And he says, for the rough times ahead. That's when you know you've been with someone for a long time.
Wise man. Absolutely.
Excellent. This is really interesting. and it's good to see in terms of particularly like, you know, food services, and it's going to be good to see them opening up again,
Yeah.
with restrictions loosening as well.
One of the very interesting things about this list is you'll see I've got down there general food and retail. So there are a lot of pre-COVID-19, we had a lot of smaller suppliers like your smaller mom and pop general food suppliers that were kind of on, I'm going to call them slightly shaky legs. And as a result of COVID-19, their turnover just went through the roof. And it's given them the opportunity to look at their businesses differently and reposition themselves. So the ones who are smart are repositioning themselves. And in fact, one of our business collaborative partners works very deeply in the Medcash space, and he runs analytics of the IGAs and bottle shops.
Yes.
And he was saying that through this period, businesses like IGA actually went up by 40%.
Oh my goodness.
40% over this. And again, they've now managed to reposition themselves in that huge retail space, competing with bigger competitors.
Is that because people were trying to avoid the crowds at the
Two
bigger?
reasons. Yep. Number one was the crowds. They were avoiding the crowds. Number two, it's moved very much to park right outside the door, run in, get what you want, jump back in your car, and off you go. Whereas if you think about your bigger retailers, you've got to park your car, walk through quite a lot of people, go through a shopping center, a lot of people, you know. So
True.
it's made that massive change, you know. So it's good repositioning.
Very interesting, that point. We live walking distance to an Aldi, and it's been great because it's allowed us to, I said, just one of us walk to Aldi, as opposed to having to load everyone in and take everyone for the shopping.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So and the smaller independents as well. But I think also the community wanting to support local small business as well.
I think it's been probably a little bit of both. It's been the convenience of you know, as opposed to, you know, as you say, taking the whole family out shopping and filling the basket, taking your time and walking through, you know, and filling your basket. I think a lot of people just wanted to get their toilet paper.
The essential items, yes.
The essential items from the fastest door down the road.
There were diamonds next to the toilet paper, but no one bothered about that. It was, we need the toilet paper. We'll leave the diamonds alone.
Yes, we'll leave those for now. But that's generally, you know, where a lot of those smaller retailers have come up really, really strong. A lot of them have started delivery services as well.
Yes.
And drive-throughs.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
The ones that could set up drive-throughs have actually set up drive-throughs. So it really has repositioned them and given them an opportunity to look at their businesses differently.
Yeah, I think it's made a lot of people obviously look at their businesses differently, because we do get complacent. I mean, whether it's, you know, business in general, we get complacent. It's a bit of a shake up to go, all right, we've got to be more nimble, or we've got to be a little bit more versatile, or look at, you know, who our new target market is.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not to say that this has been a great opportunity, but I think it's, you know, if you're looking at the glass being half full, there have been a lot of good things that have come out of this this situation, and I'm very much the type of person who would prefer to look at how can we do things differently, how can we do things better, what can we take out of this and make better. And the interesting thing is, I have a couple of clients who have been fearful, and they wanted to pull up their handbrake and say, no, we don't want to go ahead, and we don't want to buy properties. And on the other hand, I'm saying to them, hold on, wait a minute, this is actually a fantastic, this is a better time.
Yeah.
The rates have never been as low. They were announcing today that the rates are dropping to zero. You know, that's a bit of a worry, but the rates have never been so low. There's a bullish market out there. Everybody's doing a run, looking at it. And the most amazing thing is one of my clients is an older, a more mature buyer. She's 63 years old, and she said, "Hey, Mish, let's go for it. Let's do it." I found her a property that was yielding 9%. We negotiated that property to 11.8% as a result of just doing the work properly. And I said to her, let's not rush into this. Let's do it properly. So we actually slow down the bus. We've done it properly. And she's landing herself a property. She wanted, her goal was to have 20,000 income per annum, cash, pure cash. That's after all payments and bank rates and all of that. And we've managed to give her a property that's giving her 24,000 per annum.
Fantastic.
That's just exceeded her expectations and her goals. And that's purely by doing things properly and by carrying on instead of stopping, because as a result of COVID-19, we've just said, nope, we're just going to carry on going and doing things correctly. She's got great tenants. We've done the due diligence. She's got one tenant that's fallen off. It's 5 tenancies in that little property, and it's only a property that's 400,000. So it's not like it's an expensive property.
That's great.
Great deal, and she's doing well out of it. So
great. So you talked about due diligence, and that's the next slide. And let's go through that, and then we'll get our special guest Foong to share her experience in her commercial deal journey as well.
Great. Okay, so look, this is very basic. What we're talking about over here is, and I'll just go through the slides as I have them up there. Obviously, to get into a commercial property, you need a couple of coins in your pockets, and we spoke about that before. We work on a 60-40 basic, but at the moment you can get deals that are 30-70, and depending on the strength of the tenancy will determine, and your strength of serviceability will determine your lending rate. Okay, so what we do is we would do a strategy with each and every single client, and we would give them a budget so that we know we're 100% clear on what their budget is, where they are, and where. So we give you direction of where to start. Part of that strategy is finding out more about what are you more comfortable with, the type of properties like we spoke about earlier. Are you more familiar with office, with retail, with commercial, industrial? All right. So all of that is very, very important. And it's part of the due diligence process of supporting you in your commercial journey, if that makes sense. Okay. The experience part is, and I always say to people, we've got 3 legs in commercial. You need money, or you need experience, or you need education. If you've got 2 of those, you're well on your way. If you've only got 1 of those, then you need the other 2. Okay, so what are you going to do to get the other 2? If you don't have the money, you need to find somebody, you need to get educated, or you need to find somebody who's got the experience and maybe do a joint venture with them. And the same goes for the other 2 legs. Okay, so how do you find those people? Speak to Cheryl, platform like this.
Thank you. Thanks for the shout out. I was like, where do we go?
Well, there are various different communities, that we're working in. And for instance, I've got the experience, we run the education, and if you've got the money, you can join in. If you don't have the money, then speak to us about it, and we'll see if we can partner you up or get you into a deal, depending on what sort of coin you do have to come into a deal. So, and that's why I've spoken about in the slide here, we've got experience, we've got education, we do the strategy. So the strategy is, I've mentioned one strategy, which is an engagement strategy, where we would go through that with you. And Cheryl, realistically, not everybody can do commercial property. So we've got a lot of clients who are very fearful of doing commercial property. And what we would do is offer them alternatives. So if you're quite fearful about doing it, the alternative would be that you do it with somebody who is more educated or experienced, all right? And learn the process of how it works, because commercial, although it is real estate, it is property, it works very differently. So because it's got so many different moving parts, you want to make sure that you're working with somebody who understands all of those moving parts and that can support you right throughout that journey. Now, one of the things when we're doing this, when people do engage with us, I always say to them, one of the other things that is very, very, very important, and I'm really going to stress this, is the support of using commercial specialists. Because what happens is a lot of people would come on with us and I'd say to them, okay, we need to get you in front of the broker, we need to get you in front of the financial strategist, and it doesn't cost you anything. I mean, these are services, they're part of my team, whom I share with my clients. And the reason why I do that is because when the rubber hits the tar, when we're in a deal and you hit a roadblock, you want to make sure that you've got existing relationships with all of those people, with the legal guys, with the financial guys, so that I can pick up the phone and just say to them, hey, this is what's happening and we need to get through this problem. Can you help us out? And because I'm working with them all the time, they make things happen. I'll give you I'll tell you a little story. It was one of my coaching clients. She went off and she found herself a property, and she didn't tell me about it. She didn't bring it back to me and help and ask me to help her out with it. She went and she signed the contract, and she phoned me 3 days before it was going unconditional. And she said, Mish, look, I've done this. Can you have a look at this property, please? And I took one look at it and I recognized the property, because I mean, we're all over the commercial properties. I recognized it straight away and I said, oh, okay. I said, have you checked the strata? And she said, yeah, everything checked out. Now, just to give you a little insight, this was in a strata block with 58 tenancies. And beautiful unit, beautifully painted out, and new electricity and security and all that kind of stuff. And I had actually seen this property about a week or two before she had gone and signed for it. And I picked up something in the strata search. And when I asked her, I said to her, did you read the strata search? And she said, yes. I said to her, did you have somebody check that for you? And she said, well, no, but everything looked okay. And I said to her, did you notice the minus 98,000? And she said, yeah, she saw that, but she thought it was okay. I said to her, do you know that the minute you sign that contract, you are liable for $98,000? She said, what? I said, yes, you are liable for that 98,000. The minute you sign that, you take on ownership of that debt. And she freaked out. This was at about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. I said, get hold of your solicitor and get out of this deal now. You need to pull the plug on the deal. And she phoned her solicitor and she said, he's gone away for the weekend. I can't get hold of him. I said, well, what are you going to do? And she started panicking. I could hear her blowing smoke on the other side of the phone. And I said to her, look, no worries. Send me the contract. I'll sort it out for you. I phoned my solicitor. I said to him, mate, we've got a little bit of an issue. It's not your problem. You didn't do this. Please, can you help? Please, I'm calling in a favor. Long story short, her deal was going unconditional Monday at 5 o'clock. My solicitor jumped in and managed to cancel that contract at 6 o'clock on a Friday night. He managed to get her out of that deal.
Fantastic.
Okay? And that is the strength of the professionals that we're working with. the support, when I've got support up there on the team, on the screen, that's the kind of support that I'm talking about.
Excellent.
So in finance, exactly the same thing happens. When finance falls over, I pick up the phone, make a couple of calls and say, let's do this differently.
Mm-hmm.
And
Great. Well, I'd like to be able to share one of your, I believe Foong is one of your students. And she has, hi Foong, are you there? I'll give you a heads up as well, Mish. There are some questions on the Facebook page.
okay.
So after this, because I do want to have Foong on to sort of help us wrap this up as well. If you wouldn't mind hopping onto the Facebook page and responding to a few comments, that would be great.
You're asking me to
it
hop
would
onto
just
the
be
Facebook
oh
page.
not at the moment, not at the moment. when we're done, there'll be a few comments and questions there for you. Holly's
Okay.
asked where you're based and what your business name is, and I've responded, but there are a few other questions as well. But if we could, Foong, are you there?
I'll pop that onto the
Let
screen
me
in the
see.
meantime.
Okay, I'm gonna
If that's
unmute
okay.
you. Ask to unmute.
Yep, I'm here.
Hi Foong, how are you doing?
Hello, Foong.
Well, hello,
Eh,
mate.
Hi, do you have your video or would you prefer non-video? That's fine.
No, we can do video. Hang on, let me turn it on. Yep, I'm on.
There you go.
Hello, Foong.
Hi, mate.
Excellent. So this is excellent timing because I'd like if you could share your experience with your commercial deal and if you can tell us a little bit about it and how it sort of has come together.
Okay. I engaged Mish to look commercial property for me because as you know, I'm very residential person. So when it comes to commercial, I always have that fear, just like everyone else, of a big sum and couldn't find tenants and all that issue. So I found Mish. So I briefed Mish about what I wanted. So I was quite specific about my tenants. So I said to her, I basically want some sort of healthcare profession as my tenant. So I know if anything go pear-shaped, the last thing we go down the sink is the healthcare profession because everyone still need doctors, pharmacists, and so on. So it took me a while to find something I like. And then the first deal, it was a bit shonky, isn't it, Mish?
Yeah, the first one, there were quite a couple of issues going on, and I think retrospectively, thank goodness we moved on from that one.
Yeah, that's right. And then it took me another 3 months to find another commercial deal for me, and I was really happy with that. So my tenant is specialized in hearing aid center, just across Robina Hospital as well. So it met all my criteria. We put lots of ticks on it. And I think we got about 8.8% yield on that, Mish, is that right, back then?
Yeah,
So,
if I remember correctly, we started that deal at around about 8%, and by the time you actually settled, because we did some pretty hard negotiating on that, and that was when medical was really sought after. It was pretty high, so we managed to get that deal for you at 8.8%, which was a great deal back then.
yeah, I think it took us about 6 months, isn't it? 6 to 9 months to find the ideal deals, but it's worth it because at the end of the day, now we have $40,000 cash flow positive into our super fund every year, and then we increase by another 2,000 every year. So it's not a bad deal with 700,000 purchase.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, so it is a lot better than buying a property, a residential property, and renting it out. God knows whether you get 40,000 cash flow or not. So that is the first taste of a commercial deal. So I can't wait to do the second one. So this is purely bought under self-managed super fund.
And also, you're based in Adelaide.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And your property is?
Robina.
Queensland.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to
Gold
be
Coast.
in the state. So it can be anywhere. As I said to Mish, as long as we can make money, I don't mind where we go because I'm so used to buying properties interstate anyway. So, going to Queensland is nothing different at all. Yeah.
Excellent. Well done. Well
Now,
done, Foong.
Foong, you're in development and renovations and that sort of thing. And the one thing that we haven't spoken about, in fact, Cheryl, in commercial, is that renovation space and uplift properties. So exactly what Foong's doing, and Foong, you're doing the most amazing stuff in your renovations. I've seen your photographs in that. You're doing the most beautiful renovations, great stuff, adding value. Now, you can be doing exactly the same in commercial.
Yeah.
And
I think you plant that seed in my head. So the next deal will be something like that, something to uplift and do a chunk deal, so we can
Yes.
flip that and make a chunk deal out of it.
Yes, and that's the lovely thing about it, is that you can do that in commercial. So you can take a distressed property or a partly vacant property, clean it up, fix it up, and the beautiful thing about it is your renovations are a lot cheaper in commercial because you're not paying for expensive kitchens and expensive bathrooms. So your renovations in commercial are generally a hell of a lot cheaper because you're doing maybe flooring, walls, painting, cosmetics, and you're attracting a very good tenant in there. And the minute you attract a very good tenant in there, you're adding value exponentially, and then you can do an equity drawdown and go off and do it again.
Yep. Okay. Start looking for one then.
Love working with her. She keeps me
do
busy.
do I get a referral for this? And maybe this is sort of a part 2, Mish, where we then talk about sort of the add value, whether it's renovations and the development side of commercial as well. But I'm mindful of the time here, and I know we can keep talking. It was really good to be able to have you share your story, Foong. And like I said, I think there are a few questions for you, Mish, on the Facebook. So I'm going to tag you once we finish.
Okay.
Did you want to sort of finish off and how people can get in contact with you?
Yes, absolutely. So I've just put my details on the screen there. You can email me at mish@jdihholdings.com.au. Or you can find me on the website, which is mishdanielcommercial.com. And I've been very brave by putting my telephone number in there too. 0401 313 573. I am going to say it's probably best to email me at this stage. And if people would like to speak to me, I do have a booking system that I would send back to you, and you can book a time so that you have dedicated time that I can give you, as opposed to just a fleeting phone call.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
So
thank you.
Thank you.
It's been wonderful.
And I just want to say thank you to Foong for coming on and sharing your experience, Foong, impromptu.
Yes.
You're looking very cold down there in South Australia. Rugged up.
Yeah. Well, it's good to hop online, Mish, because it's nice to talk to you again and refresh all that memory, which is good. Commercial is a right path to go down eventually for most of us, because then you spread the risk.
Yeah, and I think it's great to have in your portfolio, and to have that very nice spread, across residential, have a couple of different types of residential and commercial. And like I said, I would speak to you about what types of commercial, but most definitely. Thank you for that vote of confidence, Foong. Lovely to see you again and to speak to you. I'll start looking for that uplift property for you.
Foong, I got you on a Facebook Live earlier than you thought.
Yeah, no, I should hop on.
We'll get you on an hour-long session where we do our developer spotlight. So
okay, that's all right. Just hit me up with that.
I definitely will. Well, thank you again, Mish. It's been fantastic. We do have final question, Kieran, if you wouldn't mind popping it on the Facebook group, and the comments that are attached to the Facebook Live. Mish, you can hop on to, like I mentioned, I'll tag you on the thread, and you can have a chat with some of the people that have left comments as well.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. And we'll talk about a part 2.
Great stuff. It's really been lovely chatting to you, Cheryl. It's always great chatting to you. I just love your energy and your spirit. Thank you so much for inviting me.
And the same here. It's lovely that we finally got you here too. Have a
It's been
good
a pleasure.
evening.
All right, you too.
All right. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.